Hello, everybody, and welcome to this new session of Expert Voices. My name is Nicolas Cruz. I'm part of the MobiliseYourCity Secretariat based in Brussels. And today we have this Expert Voices session in the occasion of the launch of our latest publication of for urban mobility, in which we explore different ways of proposing policy for urban mobility related to finance and how to finance sustainable, accessible, affordable urban mobility systems. This is the first of two sessions that we will have this week and next week. Today we have Ingrid Simon, head of C40 City Finance Facility. And next week we will have Maria Fernanda Ortiz from Transmilenio in Bogota. And I'll jump to introduce Ingrid today, our guest speaker. Ingrid is director of the C40 City Finance Facility, as I mentioned. And she leads programs supporting cities in preparing and financing climate-related infrastructure projects. The CFF, who turned 10 years last year, works with cities across the global south to turn climate action plans into bankable, finance-ready projects, and they provide technical assistance and they connect projects with appropriate finance sources. So today we're going to have her experience that combines climate strategy, financial structure, and project preparation, and all the work that C40 CFF has been doing in helping cities bridge the gap between ambition and implementation. That is something also Mobilize Your City strongly support. Ingrid, thank you very much for being here today with us. And I would like to start our conversation by asking you what keeps you excited about your work these days.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for having me today. It's a great question, and it's hard to pick one thing. But if I had to pick one, I would say that in my day-to-day work, we are now really starting to see some of the systemic impacts of projects we have supported before. So some really exciting stuff happening, which has naturally emerged beyond the projects we directly supported. So projects we support which have led to creating new markets or a policy change, or which are being upscaled without technical assistance, and that's really satisfying to see the fruits of the teams.
Well, thank you. And I guess it's a lot of outcomes after 10 years of work. So I am quite familiar with C40 CFF. I was part of the transport department in Bogota when we were working together for the cycling highway back in the days. But maybe for those who don't know or are not familiar, maybe you can walk us through what C40 CFF is and the work you've been done for the last decade.
Sure, very happy to. So in short, C40 Cities Finance Facility, or just CFF because it's a really long name, is a project preparation facility supporting cities. So cities in the global south. So we support cities to prepare. Actually, you've perfectly mentioned it in your introduction. Thank you so much for that. We help cities to prepare finance-ready infrastructure projects by helping them to make sure that these projects are technically prepared, that they are legally, contractually solid, and that the numbers, like from a financial perspective, also stack up. Then we help cities to link these projects to a certain source of financing, and with a big focus on what actually is right for the project and right for the city. So that's very important. So we are not a project preparation facility which is tied to a certain finance provider. So we can really put the interest of the city front and center. And then we also, in terms of like to other projects, to other programs, etc. And all of this is always very strongly embedded into a very large piece of capacity development for the cities, and also with inclusivity aspects of the project mainstream throughout the whole process. And so we work in several sectors. We do not only work in transport, we also work on waste projects, we also work on adaptation projects, we also work on energy projects and other sectors, all over the world in the global south in various regions.
Thank you. And I guess the question that I have now is like, what is the challenge that the cities face and for which CFF is jumping in and supporting them? What is it that the cities can normally not do to leverage this finance to do these projects?
So I'm gonna start with maybe debunking a little myth or a misunderstanding out there about climate finance or infrastructure finance. We always hear about this very big infrastructure investment gap. And that means we need more money, and we need more money from different sources, but it's more money alone is not enough, because the cities need to be able to receive the money, the projects need to be there to invest in, and also the money needs to be able to flow to the city, and the system in which this climate finance ecosystem operates also needs to meet the actual needs and realities of cities. So there's barriers on all these levels and all these fronts. So on the city side, I would say that depending on which city and where, of course, there might be barriers in terms of the ability to receive money. For instance, like many cities are not able to lend, like cannot like lend directly. It's also, there's very often capacity barriers, and like the bankable projects, it's so important. Like you can have the ability to lend, for instance, if it is lending, and you can have money available, but if there's no good project there, it's just not going to happen. And then on the system side, which is more the work that some of my other colleagues would be covering, it's just that the financial instruments out there and the system, they, like I already said, they don't always meet the realities and needs of cities. So it's a whole holistic area that needs to be tackled.
Wow, thank you for the answer. And I think it's true also when we at Mobilize Your City, when we found ourselves trying to propose cities, the possible source of financing there are to implement projects. I don't know if it's enough money, but there is already quite a lot. And I think the challenge is really to attract this money that is from the thinking. So I from what you said, like CFF is focusing on climate finance, and in this regard, I would like to ask you, like, why mobility when we talk about climate action? What is it? What's special about mobility in cities that could reduce emissions or adapt to climate change?
So I should not really say this, because obviously all our projects are a little bit our babies, although not really our babies, because the cities always are very much in the driving seat for the projects. But I can give away that I am actually an urban planner by background, and obviously there's a huge interlinkage between transport as a field and urban planning as a field. And I think really the beauty of a good transport project is that you can tackle so it's not even the primary thing. The primary thing would actually be providing a mobility solution, like providing service. But if you do it well, at the same time you have addressed accessibility issues, you have addressed equity issues, you have addressed quality of living. So there's just so many so many problems you can tackle in one project, which I'm sure, like as a transport professional, that you would agree with me. But I think that's what makes transport an incredibly attractive sector to work in.
Okay, thank you for that answer. I was not expecting that approach, but it's true that are very transformative, the mobility projects, especially when they're related to climate change. So I think the next thing I would like to know is, so the cities are facing this problem to access finance, and CFF is there to support. But then in the long term, how can cities strengthen the economic case for low carbon mobility investments?
So there's many aspects to tackle, of course. First of all, depending on the type of transport project we are talking about, obviously a heavy rail-based piece of infrastructure is not the same as a walking and cycling project. So it's not so easy to answer that question in one go. But what I would say is that for many transport projects, a revenue-based model is essential, but very often, if not almost always, not enough. Like it's very difficult to get rid of a certain element of subventions or subsidies, and therefore, almost like the only way you can make the case is to think about the investment case more holistically, and to not only think about the project as a standalone when you look at the numbers and the economics, but to really think about it as a business case of economic investment and try to also quantify that. And that's also something we help with. In fact, we do benefits also for the cities we support. So we don't only look at the numbers for the transport project in itself, but we would also look at, for instance, what kind of health benefits can it create, and air quality benefits. And you can go as far as like how many deaths are we actually avoiding, or it could also be by providing access to a certain area of the city or connecting A with B. What kind of economic gain could we get, and could we actually quantify that in money, like in real numbers, or can we quantify how many good green jobs this project would create? And if you start to build a case like that, it becomes a lot more attractive, and especially if there is an element of finance which does include, for example, unlocking money from national level, it will really help. So I think that's really important on the one hand. And then I'm going to sound like a broken record, but I'm going to say it again and again. Really have technically, financially, and legally solid projects. Like you can have the greatest idea, but if it technically, financially, and legally doesn't stack up, then it's not investable.
Okay, I have questions about your answer. And I think the first one is, this I hear the projects need this economic appraisal that is broader than in like the financial terms, including the benefits or the co-benefits that come with the project. Yep. In the social aspect, the health aspects. Could you, or do you have in mind like a more concrete example when you did this, or like what type of projects normally are easier to justify in these terms? And you already mentioned the national government could be like a good receipt of this information, like how a project makes a place better, like the benefits for society, but who else is ready to count these benefits to actually unlock finance to finance a project?
Thank you. Just taking a few notes. So make sure that I cover the various aspects. So in terms of examples, so for a transport project, I'm actually thinking of a project of one of our C40 colleagues of our sister program, which was in Colombia, but I have a little doubt if it was in Bogota or in another city. But we've done quite a bit of work on bus projects where we have honed in quite a lot on job creation. And not only about the creation of good green jobs, but also weave in an element of like who are potentially the beneficiaries of these jobs. And with that particular project, I'm thinking of, it's called La Rolita, and it has a very big push on bringing in female drivers and looking like what's needed to bring in female drivers into the workforce. And maybe this is kind of a slightly, how to say, controversial opinion. There is, of course, the hardware of the numbers of the economic case, but there's another aspect there which is very important, and that's about the story and the narrative you build around it and the communication about it. Because if you do the socioeconomic benefits assessments for a certain aspect or for multiple aspects, it's really important that cities and city leaders can tell the story around it on why this is important and not just the hard numbers, to ensure public buy-in and also to sell the project to whoever they need to sell it to, whether it's their citizens or whether it is indeed a decision maker at whether that's national government or an investor, etc. And then for the second part of your question on for who could this co-benefits case be important, besides national government, I think anytime when there's an element of development finance included, like a development bank, like these things do really matter. And then, like, this is a little bit more complicated and maybe a little bit more far-fetched. But if you can draw a link between quantifying certain benefits, which relate to reducing risk, for instance, losses in terms of extreme weather events, etc., then it can actually also become quite interesting when we are talking about commercial financing solutions. For instance, if there's an element about making sure that your transport infrastructure is resilient enough to keep functioning under all weather events, then of course, if there's no downtime, then your ridership numbers will be closer to what you have predicted, which makes the investment more secure, etc., etc. But it's quite complex, and that's why I also mentioned that it's really important that you can explain the numbers and tell the story around it in a very easy to understand way.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Then I think I understand better. It's really knowing your project and the impact it's going to bring to the city that you can actually have all this set of indicators and bring the numbers, but also the story to have political buy-in and also maybe the people support. No, I think with climate in cities there is this gap that there are some other pressing issues people are facing in especially global south cities. And when you talk about reducing emissions, it sounds very vague. And I think a good thing is just to link climate actions and mobility projects, explaining how they can be together and they're not mutually excluding. Thank you. I think that's very clear. And then you also mentioned the solidity in technical and financial terms of a project. Mm-hmm. I know this could go very long, but could you have like 3 or 4 points of what makes a project strong in terms of technical and financial aspects, especially for mobility?
Especially from?
For mobility projects, for transport
projects. It's indeed a very, very broad question, which you could really go into depth. But I would go back to making sure that all your 3 pillars of technical, financial, and legal, that all of them are sufficiently covered. Because if you have a technically very solid project, but the numbers don't stack up, it's not going to work. If technically and financially it makes sense, but for instance, it's a PPP and there's a problem with how the risk sharing works in the contracts from a legal perspective, or there's loopholes, it will, I guarantee you, it will fail. And then even if you have a great idea and a project is technically sound and legally it stacks up, and for instance, again, if it's a PPP, the risk sharing stacks up, that's all great. But if your numbers are wrong, then it will also fail over time. And on that numbers aspect, I think that that might be, to bring it back to mobility projects, that very often when we work with cities, we see that especially in the beginning, the numbers are sometimes a little bit too optimistic. And there is an aspect of going through that slightly unpleasant moments, looking at the numbers and then coming to the realization like, ooh, this is a lot harder than what we thought or what we anticipated or what we hoped for. But it's much better in the long run to go through that exercise and try to be realistic about the numbers, not only at large and in total, but also especially about how they ramp up over the lifetime of the project.
Thank you. And I think this is a very concrete question, but then I guess when you're mentioning like you assess the project and maybe it's not sound completely, but it doesn't mean that the project is not viable. There are ways to make it work. Like
100%. That's our job.
Exactly. Not to sound pessimistic, but like projects can come to life. They need to be strong enough and solid enough to make them. Right.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that the market there is looking so badly for good projects. Like people are investors and development banks or even TA providers like are stepping on each other and fighting to find good projects. So just there's a lot of project ideas out there, but many projects which are not investable or just nothing more than an idea you can go on. So if you have a project which is even a little bit good, you have more advantage in the current market.
That's interesting, and it's good that you mention it, because at MobiliseYourCity we believe SOMs are a good instrument to propose these projects, the sustainable urban mobility plans. At the end, you have this long list of projects proposed for the city. And maybe related to the planning process, I would like to ask you what's your experience with implementing these plans, because at the end is when the measures become projects, that is in this process that all this maturity could happen. I think this is a comment/question, but like I would like to know your experience in when maybe you saw a very concrete and detailed plan, but that was not ready to implement actual projects, or maybe a more light plan that had more concrete projects to propose, or at the end the relationship that there is with the more comprehensive C-level planning process to then come up with the more concrete projects in a city.
Well, lots of elements to your question. So don't hesitate if I forget something. First of all, I'm really happy that you bring this up. The aspects of pipeline actually and project plans, because a good infrastructure project, whether it's transport or another one, gets born before the project gets born. Like it sits indeed in a wider planning context. And there's many things you can touch upon, but just to pick two. One is that in our experience, that if a plan is, if a project is embedded into the planning documents of the city, and that can be, of course, like different types of plans, it has a much better outlook to actually be carried forward, and to also potentially survive some changes, some turmoil, etc., etc. So it's much better place, and even for us as a TA provider, it gives us more trust. Like, one of the things when we receive a project application, what we will look at is this project included? It could be climate action, it could be a sustainable urban mobility plan, or another planning document from the city. And if it's not, then I almost guarantee you that we will not support it, because we don't have the trust that we're afraid that this is some sort of a white rabbit type. The same is also true for investors, because they will look at it, like, for instance, with the development bank, they will look at it from the same perspective. They also see that if something is in a planning document, which is somehow formalized, that this project is also a little bit less risky when it comes to political transitions and all that. So yeah, I'm really sorry, but I forgot the second aspect of your question, but I'm so happy that you brought it up.
Yeah, I think it was exactly what you said, how safe it feels when a project is supported by a larger planning process. And I think you hint that it is indeed better when the project makes part of like a broader objective. Yeah, and I guess, I don't know what, like, I don't know if you have data to support this, but like how advanced cities are in this planning process. Do you think it's a common practice? Most of cities have certain kind of planning documents, or we still need to work more on producing this kind of pipeline?
So there's differences between a planning document and a pipeline, and so I'll take the two maybe. So documents, for instance, if we talk about C40 cities, they will all have a climate action plan. Otherwise, they're not allowed to be a member of C40, but CFF also supports a lot of non-C40 cities. We predominantly also work with cities from the Global Covenant of Mayors. Mm-hmm. Those cities should also have a sustainable energy access and climate action planning plan, which is a very long name, but kind of the same thing. So in terms of planning documents, I think we've seen huge progress. I think we've also seen an enormous push to make those, and now I remember again your previous question. There's a big push to make those simpler. Not because simpler is necessarily better, but just because it lowers the barrier to actually do something and finish it and put it out there, and not get stuck in this is so complicated and it takes so long. That's a planning document, or an urban planning document could also be the case. That's not the same as a pipeline. And this is a bit of my personal pet peeve, because I do hear a lot of industry colleagues talking about pipeline, and they actually refer to a list of projects. Mm-hmm. And a list of titles of projects. I have strong opinions on this. That is not a pipeline. A pipeline is creating a pipeline is having a collection or a portfolio of projects, having a form of prioritization, making sure that these projects have a